So something we don't hear a lot about is the effect of technology on reading. What are publishers doing to address that?
Well, I think one thing that publishers often forget is that one, technology's been having an effect on reading for a long time. So the kinds of technologies that we use to produce perfect bound paperback books and everything that's associated with them in terms of their distribution and where they're consumed, that's all the artifact of pretty recent technology. That's one thing. So I think treating the book, the print paper book, as something that's been static and forever, and we don't have to kind of worry about that. That's sort of a mistake I think the readers make too, as well as publishers. The other thing about the effect of technology on reading is that I think readers are generalizing both from screen to screen, or sort of within individual screens, and also from screen to screen, or from interface to interface. That's a better way to sort of include print as well. So, for instance, what you do on a desktop computer or on a laptop computer, I think affects the kinds of information that you read all day, affects the other sort of information that publishers are usually interested in, whether it's periodicals or books. So if you spend most of your time kind of crunching databases at a screen, then you might actually be more primed to kind of make a database of your friend on Facebook.
Sure.
If you spend a lot of your time playing Angry Birds on your iPad, you might be more primed to kind of do a more game-like interactive publication. But it's not just that, it's also translating between those things. So people who spend a lot of time playing Angry Birds on their iPad will also kind of look at the Kindle and look at print books and look at laptop screens, all of those differently. We're always making generalizations based on the broadest set of technologies that we're reading. It's never just within the medium or within the format. It's everything. The way we look at street signs changes the way we read books. The way we read the newspaper changes the way we read magazines. All of these things are always operative, kind of to greater or lesser degrees. So it's never just a simple, we understand what this technology is and we know how to produce for it. You also have to think about your readership, the other contexts in which they read, and the other sort of things that we might not necessarily think about as reading would involve a lot of reading, involve a lot of processing of information that they do on those devices or in those interfaces.
Wow, there's a lot to consider there. A lot of context there. Are there lessons that publishers can take from Netflix recent issues? I mean, obviously don't split off your DVD business, but
yeah, no publisher should split off their DVD business.
Hold on to your DVD business
without knowing, whether or not you've got the Twitter handle for the new company. Yeah, that's kind of a limited thing. One of the things that I think has happened with Netflix, and I think this started to happen even before this issue of splitting up, is that Netflix for a little while looked inevitable. Netflix looked invulnerable. It looked like their model of digital, particularly on the digital side, it looked like their model of digital streaming was going to be the one to go. And I think both Netflix itself, the stock market, and even customers kind of bought into this idea that Netflix was just going to get better and better, that it was always going to be available on more devices, there was always going to be more content, the price was never going to go up, everyone involved was going to make more money. I mean, that's a fantasy in a way, that there were never going to be any other competitors. So I think, a few of the things, obviously, you can argue, and I have argued with some of their decisions, but I think the big lesson that I think publishers should draw is that, anything that looks inevitable now might not necessarily look so inevitable in 6 months. Anything that looks like it's the sort of perfect model and that there's nobody who's likely to beat it. And so I think you have to you do have to find ways to continue to disrupt yourself, and I think that's the sort of positive thing of what Netflix tried to do, is try to push their business forward. The other kind of more narrow, but I mean, obviously you have to do that in a way, when you're in a consumer business, it's very difficult to do that because consumers are fickle, because competition is robust and you have to keep them happy. The other kind of narrower issue that came into with Netflix's recent troubles, and some of the things that motivated, if you look back at the Starz negotiation, and there's even some things that suggest that the split up is motivated by their negotiations with right holders in order to get streaming rights. That essentially Hollywood did not want the DVD and streaming businesses tied together, that either because of the sheer number of subscribers or because of the power of it, they said, well, we'll only really deal with you if you're only a streaming business, not if you're also working on the DVD side. That's one of the, that's the sort of Kremlinology of it, in terms of, the sort of kind of inside speculation. So this is the issue. In a way, we've already seen this with books. There was a while where, Amazon Kindle, $9.99 retail pricing for ebooks looked completely inevitable. It looked like Amazon was too powerful that no one could fight it. Publishers came back, rights holders came back, and said, no, we're going to move, with the help of Apple, a robust competitor came along, and said, no, we want to move towards agency pricing, we want to have a little bit more control, and, disrupted that. Obviously, Amazon didn't get disrupted kind of as, shockingly as Netflix is right now, but that's, one of the things that is, I think, a big lesson to draw, is that, I don't think there's any one figure who holds all the cards. It's always a combination of the people who are pushing the technology, rights holders, the stock market, and ultimately customers, readers, viewers, whatever business you're in.
Are there publishing startups that have caught your eye recently?
Well, it's not specifically a publishing startup, but I think Kickstarter might be the most interesting startup in a long time that's actually affected publishing. And the basic idea of Kickstarter is not directly tied to publishing. People do it to launch an album or throw a party, but I think, and publishers have tried to copy part of the model of Kickstarter. In terms of sort of pre-pledging money, and there are all sorts of kind of Kickstarter for books ideas. But I think Kickstarter itself is interesting for a handful of reasons, and it's more the culture that has sort of grown up around self-publishing books on Kickstarter. One of them is the kind of connection that Kickstarter authors have with their patrons. And the technology that facilitates that with, it's like when you pledge, a lot of times you get access to blog posts, or you're involved in the composition in some way, or you can be thanked in the book, or there's lots of, and that goes into the other thing, which is the ability to bundle content at a certain price. So most Kickstarter projects have levels where, if you pay $5, you might get a PDF. If you pay $10, you get a Kindle book, $15 physical book, $25 physical book that's signed, and usually these things are tiers, so that if you get one, you get everything below that as well. Which is, a retail model, I think, that's really powerful. I mean, you see this in DVDs as well, with the sort of collector's edition where you get, a physical copy and a digital copy, and then maybe there's some additional material in there. And, book publishers and retailers aren't really doing anything like that, except, again, with projects like Kickstarter. So I think that combination of community engagement, the ability to bundle lots of different kinds of content, and the sort of power of patronage that comes in, it's enabling a really interesting kind of self-publishing. That I don't necessarily think the kind of pledging money part and the self-publishing part is something, obviously, that the self-publishing part, obviously, publishers can't copy. Maybe retailers could get involved with it in some way. But the pledging money ahead of time is really not, even though that's the basic idea of Kickstarter, it's not the cultural part of Kickstarter that I think is actually more important for publishing.
So last question for you. What's your take on Amazon's book rental service?
Well, which one? Because, there's a handful of them, right? Just today, there's, Amazon Library Lending, which is a kind of book rental. That's, where if you're, a member of a public library, you can check out books through Amazon. There's textbook rentals, which is sort of, sort of proper rental service. And then there's also this rumored thing that people are talking about with Amazon Prime that would be a kind of sort of a similar to a Netflix watch instantly, or like Amazon Prime for videos, where you would have some kind of backlist titles that would be made available to Amazon Prime subscribers. So, all of those, I think what's good about each of them in their own way, and taken as an aggregate, and some of these are kind of more confirmed and newer than others, and bigger parts of the business. I don't necessarily know how much business Amazon's going to do with textbook rental services. But I think one of the things that happened when Amazon was first launched is that it looked like it really was pursuing a very singular and limited model of book publication and consumption. That was really very similar to what kind of Borders and Barnes & Noble had been doing for years with physical books, which is kind of discounted retail, individual books, mostly new authors or new editions, purchased by a single individual. And the book industry is a lot bigger than that. The book industry, there's lots of different kinds of books, and there's lots of different ways that people consume books. It's not just that people buy stuff, they stick it on their shelves. It's that you have students who are buying textbooks primarily to use, not really pleasure reading, and then they sell them back. You have people who are sort of interested in browsing. There's kind of library models. There's sharing, which Amazon has now, like Barnes & Noble, Nook, and others. And I think this kind of eclecticism is a good thing for a couple of reasons. One is that it does recognize that there are lots of different ways that readers engage with content, and that each one of those has value, and that those things are not impossible to replicate in moving from print to digital. They're not totally a function of the physical form there. So if you get the right model and you kind of make everybody happy, it can work and it can be a nice business. But the other thing is that even if they're not necessarily a great business, particularly for a company like Amazon, Amazon has a tremendous interest in sort of diffusing criticisms of its book model and also not giving customers anywhere else to go. So if you are interested in ebooks and say, well, I never want to buy a book that I couldn't sell back or something. It's like, well, you can do you can do a book rental.
Right.
I would never want to buy, it's like, why would I buy an ebook when I can get books at the library? It's like, well, you can buy our device and you can read these books at the library. So, and you've seen this is what they've done in retail business too, where some of their businesses are not huge money makers, but it's like the fact that Amazon is a retailer for all things, that you can find anything you want at Amazon, is that sort of supermarket model of retail is part of its power. And the more that booksellers, whether it's Amazon or Barnes & Noble, can say to readers, whatever way it is, whatever kind of content you want to read, whatever relationship to ownership that you want to have towards your books, whatever kind of mode of reading, whether it's really engaged stuff or just browsing, sort of dipping in and out of stuff, or doing research, or using a textbook, whatever it is that you do. We're in the reading business. We're not necessarily in the trade paperback business. We're in the reading business, the reading machine business. They're going to be able to foster better and deeper relationships with a wider range of customers, because it's going to be a better and deeper relationship to a wider range of reading.
Well, thanks so much for being with us. Appreciate it.
Well, thanks to you, Mac.